You are listening to Pivot Parenting, episode 212, Being a Confident Parent with Tony Dufresne. Welcome to Pivot Parenting, the place where we recognize when your parental role needs to shift and how to do it. I'm your host and parenting expert, Heather Frazier. Hey, how's it going? How's your day so far? My friend, confidence is one of those ambiguous things. There's a lot of mistruths about it out there floating around as well. Like you have it or you don't, and that's just the way it is. That it can be bought or purchased or worn. But the truth is it's just a skill that anyone, including you and I, can develop. And it's one that I spend a lot of time talking about in my book, How I Fixed My Teen. Because to be able to feel confident is a huge piece of parenting. I was recently talking to somebody who had read my book, and she felt so seen. She appreciated that aspect of my book, that she was not alone in how she felt or experienced her child, her religion, her experience as a mom. And when we feel seen and validated, that brings more confidence to us because we know that we're not alone. Has this ever happened to you? What I love about confidence and that I'm learning from my book is that it's different for everyone. We gain our confidence, we read things, and they relate to us in specific and individual ways. And those come together to create goodness in our life and in our parenting. And I am absolutely loving all of the wonderful feedback that I'm getting from my book. Thank you for emailing me and DMing me and getting on calls with me to discuss it. I'm absolutely loving the ripple effect of me being really, really vulnerable. In one of the chapters at the end of it, I said, I just need to go cry or shower because I feel like I have just exposed so much of myself. Because I know that in me sharing my hurts, my wounds, my successes, that helps you find who you are, develop your strengths, identify your strengths and successes, and where you thought that nobody could even know or relate and you had to hide. You don't have to hide those parts of you. This is the most beautiful part of confidence, is not caring or being okay with people seeing all of you and not just the pretty polished parts of us that do all the right things. So this is what Tony and I are talking about today, is confidence, and we have a great conversation. I hope that you enjoy listening to it. As always, I would love for you to review my podcast so that more moms and dads can find it and learn. It really does help promote my podcast when it has a lot of reviews and current reviews. And as always, my book is available to you on my website, heatherfrazier.com, as well as Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Walmart, all of those basic retailers as well. All right, I am here with my friend Tony. Welcome everybody to the podcast. And Tony, I'm so excited to have you here. If you want to introduce yourself so that my audience can know what you're about.
Wow, that's so much pressure. I got to throw all my own props out. Heather, so glad to be on your show now. A little turn of the tables since you were on my show. That was such a great show we had.
It was a good conversation.
For the record. Oh, so great.
Yeah.
It just then the teenage girls and teenagers, and it was all. Anyway, I'm Tony Dufresne. I am in beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona. Not the surface of the sun at the moment, but it's a blast. And so I am a women's confidence expert, or I promote myself to be that way. I've got my master's in psychology. I was a therapist for some time. I went back to school, got my PhD in the philosophy department under consciousness studies. I have this fixation on confidence because basically I raised my daughter on my own since she was about 1. I went to daughter bootcamp, and I went through a number of epiphanies in regards to the realities that women live versus men. And that was a huge shock to me. And I wanted to do right for my daughter. And so I learned a lot of things by raising her and seeing her from her life, from her perspective. And that drew me into working with women. And I absolutely love it. And I have a podcast. It's called She Talks Confidence Podcast. I have a book out called Surrounded by Idiots that I wrote a number of years ago. Yeah, and that's and we can talk about that too, because I love it's a very tongue-in-cheek title. Some people get a little bent out of shape.
I like the tongue-in-cheek title, as my book is titled "How I Fixed My Teen," but
exactly. So and I'm really happy to be here. And the best part about today, I think, is the way I like talking about stuff. And especially on shows, we really didn't talk a whole bunch about what we're going to chat about specifically. So
yeah, completely different conversations.
Completely. So let's make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. On Tony's podcast, we talked about one specific chapter of my book called Garbage Disposal Moms. And Tony's so great to talk with. And I have to say that as a woman, a man who's speaking to women's confidence, I find kind of intriguing. Like, is he going to just mansplain at me, or is it, but Tony's anything but that. And like he explained, he really loves the world of women, but doesn't claim to fully understand it as a man.
Oh, never. And if I did, that would be the biggest fraud out there.
Yeah.
No, like I told you before, I can, the difference in empathy and sympathy. I can never empathize with women because I'm not one. And there's no way I will ever be able to do that. But I can certainly sympathize with the different realities and the inequities. And it's not a victimization thing at all. It's just different.
Yeah. There are different cultural ways that we are brought up based on the gender that we identify as kids. Yeah.
So much so. In society, I mean, honest to God, it really is. It's really set up. It's a very, man set up type of a thing. And that's kind of how it still is. Now it's not.
I think the word's patriarchy, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I couldn't think of the word actually. Not like I don't use that a million times. I think it's getting better, but it's still there. And the problem is I think a lot of it's subconscious.
And that brings me to exactly what I wanted to talk about with you today, is because confidence is your specialty. And that does coincide with cultural norms.
Mm-hmm.
And my audience, as parents of teens, when I'm talking with my clients, I see a lot of struggles that they have in their parenting and the phase of life that they're in when their kids are teens because of confidence.
Yeah, isn't that it's almost like a quadruple whammy. It's because you're trying to figure out how to parent from the get-go. There's no manual.
Yeah.
And so you're day one, you're hitting the ground, you're trying to figure out all this stuff. Then you're like, okay, I kind of get this. Yeah. And then it changes a little bit.
Puberty hits.
Right. And then and then it changes a lot. Right. And so once puberty hits, I'm a big fan. I was brought up through the traditional psychological, cognitive behavioral. I'm a big Erickson fan. I don't know if anybody knows Erickson. He did the child development stages of life. I think that is spot on, especially when it comes to the adolescent stage, the identity versus role confusion stage, the stage 5, which is between 12 and 18. He said, to be honest with you, I think especially with teenage girls, I think it's starting like even earlier. than that, because my granddaughter is 10 now, and I'm starting to see her shift into that
Well, they
stage.
have so much more, what's the word? They are introduced so
Stuff.
much younger
Yeah.
to all the options and media, and it's not just the quiet home culture. The world is becoming smaller and starting younger.
Well,
So
plus the
yeah.
fact that their brains aren't, we all know that the prefrontal cortex, that part there right at your forehead, it's not developed. That's the rational part of the
Yeah,
brain.
no,
The
that's
part that,
later
and
teen.
it's like, well, that's not even developed till 22 or 24. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
every year they extend it out. Sooner or later, it's going to be like
Last I
35.
heard, it was like 15 to 25 is
Right.
when that's
No, yeah,
developing.
it's like
Like,
22. They
yeah.
say 22, 24. Honestly, I know people that it's like they're like 50, it still hasn't developed, but that's beside the point. The thing is that with all of the stimulation now with social media, which we could do 10 hours on the social media impact on kids, it's too much. It's too overwhelming. Kids, if your prefrontal's not developed, you still live in a very binary world, a very either or, a very black and
Yeah.
white world, which when you're young, that tends to kind of help you make decisions and figure stuff out.
Well,
But
it's the level at which they can handle.
exactly. And the
Yeah.
problem is that if you're still operating, in a binary or an either or world in terms of things are great or they're terrible, there's no like middle ground there almost. And then you get exposed to social media stuff. And of course, everybody knows in adolescence, it's all about identity development, and it's all about independence, and it's all about trying to figure out who you are and then also who your tribe is at the same time, and who you can trust and who you can't. And it's about fidelity in terms of, your close compadres and, who you can share things with and not. And so with all that being the case, it's very difficult because you don't have the capacity to be able to, figure all that stuff out when you're getting bombarded with expectations, unrealistic expectations, which takes you out of your own personal journey. Which also goes into the fact that I think that coming back just to the family unit, I think that's the biggest problem facing parents with teenagers is,
Yeah.
like I said at the beginning, it's, you have to almost not toss the instructional manual out that you already wrote for them up to 10 or 12, but you have to really go into another level and modify it, because your parenting style has to change with that shift. And if it doesn't, that's when you run into rebelliousness. That's when you
Yeah.
run into,
They don't want to
oh,
be treated like a baby anymore.
they hate me. They don't.
Yeah.
And and I know, because I did this too.
Yeah.
They are babies, right?
They are, but they don't see
But
themselves as
right.
that.
But
Yeah.
show me a 14-year-old that doesn't know everything in the world, right? And it's not the case, because every 14-year-old thinks they know everything in the world. But of course, we know that they don't. So how do you handle that? That's the question, right? You
Yeah.
can't handle it like you used to. And,
Well, and then you couple that. So you have their psychosocial stage of development, and then you have what the parent is going through,
right.
which is almost like another rebirth of identity. The common phrase is midlife crisis,
Mm-hmm.
but essentially the kid doesn't need them like they did as a toddler. And so they have to reinvent who they want to be for this next portion of their life. So you have these two people trying to sort out their identity. And with parents, their confidence can really be crushed by their teen, either intentionally, like, I hate you, mom, or I hate you, dad, or, the principal is calling and they're going to be suspended because they hacked the school system, and like,
Mm-hmm.
not speaking from experience at all. But so they're suspended and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst parent ever. And so you're trying
Right.
to also like figure out the new who you're going to be as a parent. So can you speak to that psychosocial stage that the parent is in, and the confidence factor in that.
Yep. That's because, again, you think that you have things figured out and then you don't. Everything change. All the rules change when they get
Yeah.
to that age. Now, the kicker is, and the reason why this is a perfect storm for parents during that time is that we're going through an identity crisis too.
Yeah.
Because through that time, and if you do the job right as a parent, a lot of your identity is in being a parent.
Yes.
Now, of course, it's also in being a successful career or, a volunteer or whatever the case may be. But your number one job is to be the parent, to be the best parent you can be.
Yeah. And now they don't want anything to do with you.
Right. And so now you're not getting the reinforcement for that, right? Because before, they get mad and they would say they hate you as a 5-6-year-old or whatever. It wasn't the case. And then
they're giving you snuggles.
Yeah. Right. Then they cuddle up to you afterwards. You read them a book, get them some milk. Everything's great. Not the case anymore. Now they slam the door. Now they're in their room and God knows what they're doing. Well, the issue comes from the fact that we feel as though, and especially at the very beginning of when this stuff starts, then because you're clueless again. And it's so frustrating as a parent being clueless again. But when that first starts to happen, the kicker is that we don't realize we're going through, now what's our role? And then sometimes if that's not a conscious thought to you, then it becomes, a subconscious, then you become passive aggressive, or then you become frustrated as well. And your fuse is shorter. And so not only is your fuse shorter, the world that a 13-year-old lives in has no basis in rational reality in a lot of circumstances. So you're sitting there, you're trying to rationalize with this child still that thinks they got their stuff figured out.
I don't suggest rationalizing. Just
right. But how many people do that? And I'm guilty, right?
At the beginning, well, because they're as tall as us.
Right.
They must think like us, but they don't.
Yeah. And they're starting to, because you can hit on some things, right? Because now you have similarities and you can mess around and joke around. Things are a little bit different. They're a little older. It's a little more kind of fun. But then all of a sudden, boom, it's like Jekyll and Hyde. And then and especially with girls, and I can speak personally from this because raising my daughter, I mean, on a dime, like flips. And
you can see their brain switch from their amygdala to their prefrontal really fast. I
used to tell my daughter, Rach, I could tell the second that you switch because there was a glaze over your eyes and you look through me. and the second that I saw that you're looking right through me, I knew that forget about all the normal, logical reasoning skills that I developed, even like going to school and having degrees on this stuff. I was as lost as anybody in that circumstance. So when that does happen, it's a matter of understanding and having awareness that is the case. And then not trying to use the old tools that used to work in the past. Now, the problem is that most parents don't understand this is happening. And then they become, again, very frustrated. And then it's a clash of titans. And then it's a clash of wills. And then it's you're living in my house which is the absolute worst possible thing that you could say. But when it comes down to you trying to create boundaries and those boundaries aren't sticking, that's what's going to happen. And then it's going to become and I know the battle of wills.
How do you hang on to your confidence in that? How do you help your clients?
First things first, you have to understand that it's a different gig than it was before. And that this child is not going to be in a rational, logical state of mind. They don't have that room hasn't been renovated yet in their head, hasn't been added on in their head yet. First things first, understand who you're working with. And then take a step back. And then it's about, and this is subtle, and you're walking the line on this, but it's about maintaining reasonable boundaries. And I was, for Rach, I always used to say respect. It's respect for me. It's respect for the house. It's respect for it's just so maintain respectful boundaries, and at the same time, allow them through questions, through opening up, instead of dictating and putting them in a particular place. They'll hate it. I mean, it's like backing them into a corner.
So don't talk at your kid is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Again, it's just about what's going on. And most of the time, it's not going to be fulfilling to you. It's not going to be, oh, well, thanks for asking. Well, have a seat. Now, this is what's happening. My friend is having this and that, and they're not talking to me. It's not going to be that. It's going to be nothing. Nothing's wrong.
I'm fine.
Just leave me alone. I'm fine. And you're like, okay. And then the key is to, and again, you and I talked about this a lot on your show, not take it personally. Do not take it personally. Now that's really, really hard, especially when the playbook or the instruction manual that you wrote out for the first number of years was starting to work pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's not the case. You're not getting the same feedback loop that you did before.
Your hugs and kisses don't heal their wounds.
No, they don't. As a matter of fact, it's get off me a lot of times.
Don't touch me.
Right. And actually from a developmental standpoint, there's a huge reason for that.
Yeah.
Because at that time, what they're doing is they're trying to create their own sense of self.
They want autonomy.
Right. Instead,
and that's healthy.
It's 100% healthy, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that through that process, of course, you're like, what did I do wrong? And why am I now the bad guy? And the kicker is, especially in single parent households or whomever happens to be the one that's the closer of the parent,
the emotional caregiver.
Exactly. They're the one that gets crapped on. They're the one that gets they're the one that gets the most energy, negative energy.
They get the jabs, they get the eye rolls.
Right. And why is that? It's because the child subconsciously knows that you will still be there after.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Yeah. It was a huge learning curve for me to, first off, learn to ask my teenagers if I could hug them, because I'm very physically affectionate. That's one of my favorite ways to express love to my loved ones is hugs and snuggles. And when they would say no, to not be offended.
Yeah, but that's tough. I mean, it
is tough, but I just have to remind myself, like, that's how I like, but it's not how they want it right now. And that's because of them, not because my hugs stink. They don't. They're amazing.
If you do say so yourself, which, and the kicker is your kids still know that.
Yes.
They do. And that's not even, again, like you said, that's not the point. But what is that? That's in a perspective shift. That is a reframing of reality, because you don't live in the same world that you did when your kid was 8. You don't.
And they always wanted my hugs.
Right. Of course they did. And they still do. That's the funny part. They still do, but they don't want to think or have you think or have you feel as though they need that.
Yeah.
And that's and that's the big shift. And if you can shift that way, and again, it's really, really tough, because your identity as a great mom, as a great dad, as a great parent, your identity is entangled in the fact that you're getting in a feedback loop, you're getting reinforcement that you are, and you have this relationship with them. And there's that level of intimacy and that level of connection that you have. And yet you're giving even more, I've found, to teenagers, because because the world's expanding for both of you.
Yeah.
And you're getting less, if anything. And that's a really tough gig to go. But again,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the thing I tell my clients all the time is, what are your expectations here? Because a lot of times they just expect the same outcome. They expect the same reinforcement. And my whole thing is, you can't. You have to revise your expectations in terms of how your kids are going to reinforce your relationship. And if you do, remember, even though you're not getting that from them, it doesn't mean that you're not the most important person in their life, which you are. Obviously, especially if you get dumped on the most, you are 100% the most important person.
That doesn't make moms feel better.
I know, but
they're the meanest to you, which means they love you the most. It still is like,
right. Now, does it mean that they're allowed to do that? No, it doesn't mean that, because that's where boundaries come up. And that's what I told my daughter numerous times. And remember, you can't have this talk when things are elevated.
No,
because when things are elevated, they'll just get very defensive, because they'll get defensive if you say hello.
Yeah.
So
no, you have to wait when they're well fed, well rested.
And when you guys are connecting on just a
Yeah.
chill level,
Yeah.
then it's a matter of continuing to reinforce. Listen, and I always told my daughter this, like word for word. I'm going to give you a lot of rope because I know through all the things that I've learned and all the people that I've worked with in therapy that this time of your life is a very important time to find yourself or to go out there and explore. It's really important. And I know for a fact that kids that are not allowed to do that during stage 5, during the identity stage, grow up with some severe connection issues, severe personality issues. I mean, not all the time, but it does
Yeah.
impact
It
that.
can lead to
It,
struggles.
it can a great deal. And so I said, I'll give you enough rope, but don't hang yourself on that and don't hang me. And that's the boundary that I always set for her. And again, it always came down to respect. And if she did lash back at me, because projection is just a huge thing or displacement of that
Mhm.
energy. If she did and she started to, project how she felt about herself and started saying I'm the meanest person in the world, or you can take some of that, but when it gets to the point where you set your boundary, because everybody has different boundaries on that.
Sure.
Once it's crossed, nope, that ain't happening. And so is the key here is very, very, very clear boundaries that everybody knows, and they know if they cross it, there has to be a consequence to that. I'm sorry. There has to be. It's
Yeah.
not like the one problem that I see a lot with kids with teenagers, with clients with teenagers, is they feel as though there's a solution that both people's lives or everybody's lives will be conflict free,
And that solution feels really good too.
right? But there is no solution
Yeah,
to
no.
conflict free. The solution is to deal with things in a constructive manner.
Yeah. And
That's the
conflict
solution.
actually is a really good thing. It's contention that we don't want.
100%. Yeah, and it's
Conflict
and
can
yeah.
be really like connection
Again, you're
invading.
there, and interestingly enough, through the conflict, and a lot of times, you listen to your teenager, and they'll be talking about stuff, and you're like, who are you talking about? And actually, more or less, they're talking about themselves, more than likely. And through that process, it's almost like somebody coming into therapy, an adult, and sitting down and just rambling. Because therapy 101 is you usually say, especially on the intake when somebody comes in initially, just let them talk. Just kind of feed them some. Well, Kate, where'd that go from there? And but let them talk, because a lot of times it's almost like journaling. You're kind of doing
Yeah.
a mind dump, and you're reconciling things or you're processing things as you say them. Teenagers do this a lot. And so giving them the ability to do that, but again, with having clear boundaries that they understand and you understand, and there's also going to be consequences from that. And you can't have a situation without consequences, because that's when you raise monsters that end up being sociopaths with no empathy whatsoever for anybody, and they think they can get away with everything. That's where like massive entitlement comes from. And as long as you don't do that, because respect, you're going to respect them. They need to respect you. They need to respect the house, their brothers and sisters, their other, mom, dad, whatever, their whatever. There has to be a level of respect. That's where the boundary gets set.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like for moms to find their confidence, or dads who are listening, to have boundaries, to not make it about you, and then any other steps that they need to be doing here?
Drink heavily.
Drink. I would
I'm
not
kidding. No,
suggest
no,
that.
I'm kidding. I'm
I
kidding.
know, I know.
No, I mean,
I see your face.
just because it works for me. No, I'm
No.
kidding too. No, really. Um, no, it's just just be okay with where you're at. I mean, again, don't have expectations that you can do anything to keep things from escalating, because you
Yeah.
can't. And
Okay.
that's the one thing that a lot of parents are very frustrated with. They're like, I'm doing everything I can, and things are still happening. I'm like, they're going to.
Yeah, which I think ties into what you were saying earlier about filling of the cup. Like, our kids do fill our cup a lot when we're little, and our identity when we're in the trenches of little kids really does oftentimes become their mom.
Mhm.
And so it sounds like another step could be finding ways to fill our own cup and not relying on a partner or our children to do that for us.
100%. You know, that's funny because I just heard a metaphor a little while ago, and it was about filling cups. Is that when you're raising younger kids and kids are younger, the smaller cups, and so easier to fill, right? Or
Sure.
you fill those cups up. I mean, it's really, but when they get older, both your cups are bigger, and it's a little harder to fill both of them. But it's a matter of not looking to your teenager to fill your cup. Your cup is going to be full or filled by you being present and by you having levels of awareness and by you being a supporter without being a lapdog
Yeah.
to your kids, which is super important because they will. I tell you right now, you let them do whatever they want and let them take their phone to bed and have it on all that. They may, you might be the cool mom for a second until they're pissed off
I'm a
because
cool
you don't do
mom.
right. But
Yeah. It's not good for
innately,
them.
subconsciously, they'll lose respect for you.
Yeah.
They will, and then that will not go well at all for you or for them further on down the line.
Yeah, no, permissive parenting is not a quality parenting style. The interesting thing is, to me, as we're talking, that I'm observing though, is this need for us to fill our own cup to maintain, how we want to feel in our confidence. It does coincide with them not needing us and our, midlife crisis, like our, what does it call? Regeneration. I can't remember Eric Erickson's exact words for midlife for that stage, but it's essentially I am going to now rebirth myself and this is the new skill, hobby, qualities, career that I want to take on, or we become like completely shut down and inactive. What are the words again?
Well, he has. I always go to Maslow and to
Okay.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs because
Those are good too.
Erickson's more developmental up until I think it's generation regeneration or
Yes,
yeah, and
that's it. Yeah.
Maslow is self-realization at the end of it. And it's like
Yeah.
what food, shelter, the bottom line is just the basic, right? Just to
Yeah.
survive,
Food,
food,
shelter,
shelter,
yeah.
relationships and all which with kids.
And
And
then
then
beliefs.
right. And then up to, self-realization where
Uh-huh.
you kind of have the ability. Now, a lot of people, they get up to that point and they're so beaten down or they're so still caught in their small bubble of reality that they're not able to see that and they're not able to get to that point. But again, that brings up a good point because the sooner you realize that raising kids is part of your developmental journey, that the more you will embrace the change and you will embrace the opportunities that lie in parenting them at every step of the way. And I can tell you now, Rach being 30, 31, it's still going on.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop. It changes. Now, of course, it's a lot easier than it was
Sure, sure.
during the teen years, but it's still opening up things and our relationship is still evolving. And it's such an amazingly great thing. And we had this talk a lot because now my grandkids are 10 and 8. And my daughter always goes back and says, it's now I see why you did this. And now I see why you did that. And I said, yeah, I said, I regret nothing in terms of my approach to raising you. And I got a lot of flack from my family, my immediate
Yeah.
family. I mean, a lot because my immediate family was very, very, small
By the
bubble
book.
reality, very by the book, very, waspy, if you will, in terms of old school, like, carrot stick. It's more stick than carrot. It's wait till your dad gets home. It's,
Yeah.
not great stuff. And I even said it in my book. One of the things that in going through therapy as an adult, one of the things I tried to reconcile was identity and trying to figure that out that I didn't get the opportunity to do during the adolescent phase because my upbringing was limiting in terms of that. And so I regret nothing because that's how I raised my daughter and now she's raising her kids that way as well. And so to break that cycle is like one of the greatest accomplishments of my life, to be able to do that. And then to have an amazing relationship with her and with my
Yeah.
grandkids. Now, it's just the funnest, greatest thing ever. And I feel as though a lot of it has to do with me allowing her to develop into the person that she is.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask, we're almost on time, but I want to ask one more really important question that you're bringing up as we talk. A lot of times when our kids are teenagers, there's a lot of life upheaval. We're getting a divorce. We are starting our career again because we were at home with them and now we're coming back. And a lot of these things take confidence, to leave a harmful marriage or to begin a business or go get our master's or PhD or whatever it is. This is a common time when my listeners are perhaps doing these things. Um, how does not only the transition with our child, but as an individual and what we're doing, how does that play into our confidence?
I think you said it right there. Individual. A lot of people lose themselves in the identity of being the parent. And then all of a sudden they wake up, and especially when the child becomes a young adult and goes through this cycle, then the teen years and comes out the other side and they're ready to take the next step. We're like, hold up. There's a lot of time and space now around me that wasn't there before. And then you
Yeah.
start to think, whoa, wait a minute. What am I doing? And and the way that you had your life set up at that time was a lot to do with trying to make it the best for your kids and
Yeah.
your
And
family
now
and
they
your
can
family
drive
unit.
themselves places
Right.
and it's totally different world.
Yeah. And you find yourself with so much space and so much. It's like being in an empty house and you're like, wow, I can run around. I can do whatever. And then you're like, whoa, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I deal with this a lot with my clients. Most of my older clients that are in this empty nester type of scenario, it's almost a fear. It's almost an anxiety that comes out because now there's an identity crisis in terms of, well, then who am I? And if I'm not a parent primarily, or if that's not where my energy is going, then who am I and what do I do?
Yeah. How do we find our confidence?
Right. So the confidence is found in taking a deep breath and realizing that if you did your job right, you're where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because if you gave your kids the wisdom and the moral background and the foundation that they need, you're at where you should be. Now, what I always tell them is that don't atomic bomb your life if you feel as though you're in a place now because all of a sudden things are exposed. Once they leave, a lot of times you see things in your life that
It's
maybe
a
aren't
common time for divorce.
real. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because now you're like, well, hold up. Either I was consciously staying in the marriage because I felt that having a nuclear family was important to the kids, or and now I'm at a situation where I'm going, well, hold up a second. When the kids aren't around, our relationship really doesn't exist anymore, or it's not fulfilling to me. Now, in those circumstances, it's really important to take a really good look at the relationship and have communications, because a lot of times the relationship will not die on the vine, but it'll wilt because of the fact that most of the energy and most of the plant food is going to the kid plants instead of the relationship plants. So this is either an opportunity to revitalize and to really find, because it's not the same relationship as it was 20, 30 years ago, or 15 years ago. It's not the same, which is exciting. If you have a deep, committed, love for this person as a person, you have now a chance to not rekindle the old, but kind of regenerate and recreate something, or just create something brand new, because you're in a different time of life and so are they. And that either works or it doesn't. But it's really important in terms from a confidence standpoint to have those thoughts, to own those. The key is that you're no longer just the mom. You are you first and foremost. Now the relationship is there, and that's a big part of your life. But it should not now subordinate your value.
Yeah.
You should step up and say, okay, now I have the time to maybe do some things here and there. And you know what? You deserve it.
Yeah.
Because if you did parenting right, you gave it all and you gave 110% to your
And they
kids.
successfully launched.
Yeah, exactly. And you did your job. And you know what? You deserve it. And I always tell them, and you'd be shocked at the level of almost ease or tension that goes away from my clients when I just say you deserve it, because they do.
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't feel as though they do. And all of a sudden now they're like, well, what do I do now? I don't have anybody else to serve. Well, serve yourself.
Yeah. What
It
I'm
doesn't.
hearing is kind of the overarching message of confidence, and you tell me if I need to tweak it at all, is that it comes from within, of knowing who we are and being authentic to who we are.
100%. And that's the discovery in the new journey, is to now rediscover who you are, instead of just being a mom as your primary identifier, or a dad as your primary
And the
identifier.
nice thing is, my friends, is that you can enjoy that process because it doesn't have to look like anybody else's, and there's no time frame.
100%. I got to tell you, I went
tool
through it.
around and explore and have fun.
I had a blast.
Yeah.
I really did. And it's just fun, and it's exciting, and it's new, and it's a little awkward at the beginning, especially given, how much time and effort you put into being a dad or a mom. But that's important. That's where confidence comes from. It comes from you finally saying, all right, this is me. And if you say, if you say, who am I? And you don't know, or you don't have a pretty clear vision of it, then start to explore that through journaling, through meditation, through volunteering, through hanging out with different things, through going on trips, and find out what lights the fire, and what your purpose is moving forward. Moving forward. Everybody has a purpose at any time if they choose to do it. So then do that.
I love that. Okay, Tony, before we wrap up, any final words, anything our listeners need to know in the world of Tony Dufresne?
Again, wrapping up, that's another hour and a half. I mean, basically. No,
That'll be so fun.
I have my website's tonydufresne.com. And if you can't spell it, because I'm not even going to try, because there's a lot of consonants.
It's in the show notes.
Right. It's theconfidencedoc.com. And I work with women from 25 to 45-ish or so during transitions. And if you want to chat, if you want to go on and grab my new ebook, and my ebook is basically my whole program that's sort of encapsulated in summarized form. Amazing. And it kind of goes through the, what is true confidence and how you can set yourself up for it. And it talks about the stuff we talked about today. And again, that's like $7. So it's like a pumpkin spice latte and a cake pop, basically.
There you go.
I used to say, don't get those things and just get my book, but I say get both.
Yeah, you deserve both.
Yeah, you do. 100%.
Get your favorite beverage and a good book.
Exactly. So, other than that, I have my Surrounded by Idiots out there. You can find that anywhere. And we talked about, call to action towards the end, and kind of to throw that out. And I would say, if you are feeling lost in any circumstance a scenario that we had talked about, understand that that's the first step. The first step is really acknowledging the fact that you're lost, but then realize, going through this process of raising a teenager and getting out of it, it's never easy. So, curb your expectations, and then reach out for help if you need it.
Love it. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather. Appreciate it.